Hello, good morning, and good evening. All will be revealed in a minute as to why. To Jude Bolger, who is the CEO and co-founder of Nuvho. How are you doing today, Jude?
Great, Dan. Thanks for having me on the cast. Great to participate.
Thank you. So, by the wonders of modern technology, I'm in the UK and you are in Australia. Are you in Sydney? Is that right?
Brisbane based, actually. Yeah, headquartered in Brisbane.
Brisbane.
We got staff around the country, so
That's
yeah.
right.
But I'm in sunny Brisbane.
Good for you. So it's morning in the UK. It's evening in sunny Brisbane. We're gonna talk all things independent hotels ahead of No Vacancy London in just a few weeks' time, which Nuvho are obviously taking part in. Before we do that, Jude, for those maybe they're few and far between, but for those that are listening that have got no idea who you are or Nuvho, tell us about you and the business, please.
Sure. So, Jude, you mentioned co-founder with Nuvho. We're a business that's focused on the commercial function for hotels. So sales, marketing, revenue management, primarily, they're three of our core services. We have some other services, but that's our core raison d'etre. Ultimately, is driving efficiencies in the commercial function for hotels, and we primarily focus on the independent hotel market. And what I mean by that, where we classify the independent hotel market as, yes, mom and dad operators, individually operated properties, but we also consider domestic management companies as part of the independent hotel market, domestic portfolios. So anyone that's outside of the international chain hotel realm, we consider independents because they're ones that can't really, drive lower cost of acquisition, in the commercial space.
Sure, thank you. In fact, that explanation was useful to me because obviously I've only been in this space for about a year, and every time I think I've got it sussed, there's, there's another potential explanation. So I personally appreciate that. So we're actually going to talk about the independent hotel market, the size, the reach, the sophistication, because branded operators sometimes tend to dominate the conversation. But we know the independent hotel market, as you've explained it, is enormous. So, from your perspective, how significant is it globally? And then let's talk about nuances by region. So if you can sort of bring that to life, maybe where independence dominates strongly and level of commercial sophistication and so on.
Sure. Look, what's really interesting when you look at the incidence or the volume of hotels by market, there's a clear correlation between, the volume of hotels in Western markets, markets that have had mature tourism over a period of 100 years. So, global markets that have the most volume of hotels are, very much wealthy nations, USA, Japan, they all feature very high in terms of the volume of hotels. And if you break the mix down then into, well, what proportion by region is independent and what proportion by region are chain operated. So here in Oceania or Australia, roughly 50% of the market's independent and 50% are operated, under internationally branded hotels. Okay, you move to Europe. It's really very much independently driven. So around 75% of the volume of properties, not rooms, so properties in the European market are independent hotels. And then, on the other side of the spectrum, you move to North America, the USA in particular, whereby around 30% of the market is independent and 70% of the market's branded, or large chain branded properties, both, international, but often operated under franchise as well. So, there's a real difference where you go
Sure.
in region around the world, what the incidence of independents are. And, chain branded hotels see the independent market as, an opportunity to grow market share for their brand. And, their relative success and failure, over the past 30, 40, 50 years, is always a point of discussion.
Thank you. And I guess independence, by definition, we tend to sort of group them together, right, as one segment. But I guess in reality, they range from very basic through to extremely advanced businesses in relation to the
Absolutely.
commercial sophistication.
We refer to them, yeah, exactly right. As as a hotel operator, are you a sophisticated operator or are you an unsophisticated operator? And you can have a single individual hotel that's operated in a very sophisticated manner, accessing tools, expertise, insight to ultimately drive revenue and cost of acquisition outcomes. Equally, you can be an unsophisticated hotelier, and often we find they're new hoteliers or inexperienced hoteliers that are unsophisticated, or they're operating in less competitive markets that don't require them to be sophisticated hoteliers. And depending on who you are and what knowledge and what ecosystem you've bought into, access to tools and expertise is often a function of, well, am I part of a franchise? If I'm not part of a franchise or I'm not being operated under a management contract by a large international group, how do I then, as an independent operator, access the right tools and expertise and the ecosystem that fits with my hotel product?
Sure. It's fair to say that independent hotels, I mean, they're also always facing, by definition, because I guess sometimes of their size and shape, headwinds and challenges. You've called them hair on fire problems prior to this conversation, which will be challenging for myself and you, but nonetheless, you just got that one. Let's talk about the reality on the ground. So, constant pressures, always reacting rather than planning. Talk to me. You obviously speak to lots of independents, so does your team. What are the real challenges that independents are dealing with right now?
Sure. Look, I mean, probably the most topical discussion in this arena is the cost of acquisition. And when we refer to cost of acquisition, we're not just talking about cost of acquisition in a linear context in terms of what the retail cost of acquisition is. So through various OTAs, 18 to 25% range, that is one of the hair on fire problems in the independent hotel space. Because if you are not, and this is really interesting, if you're going to break the industry down in terms of structure and access to collective bargaining processes to be able to access lower retail cost of acquisition. So, if you're a part of an international hotel group, depending on who it is, you can access a retail cost of acquisition through OTAs of somewhere in the region of 13 to 15%. So the largest hotel chains in the world will have negotiated commission rates with retail online travel agencies, in that range, 13 to 15%. If you're an independent operator, not part of a franchise agreement, you are in the realm of 20 to 25% retail cost of acquisition. Okay, so again, I'll make the distinction between retail cost of acquisition and engaging in a process to get a reduced blended cost of acquisition through retail, wholesale, contracted sales, and marketing processes to help lower your overall blended cost of acquisition. But if you're a mom and dad operator, not part of an international management or a franchise, and we've got lots of domestic management companies here in Australia, in the UK and across Europe as well. Unless you have scale in excess of 400 or 500 properties, and now most domestic operators are not in that realm, you do not have a seat at the negotiation table in a retail cost of acquisition discussion. You're a minnow, and 400 or 500 properties is simply not sufficient. And when you consider that the largest hotel companies in the world, let's say Marriott up around the 13 to 14,000 property mark, that's the biggest number, which is not that big when you think about it. And you bring it down to number 12 on the list, which is again is a very well known international operator, but they only have 950 properties. So there's a big difference between being number one at 13,000, being number 12 at 950. But as soon as you drop into number 15 or 16 below 500 properties, you do not have sufficient bargaining power to, throw a stick or wield a stick to reduce your retail cost of acquisition. So that's the hair on fire problem, and that's the one that's been around for 20 years. It's a 20-year hair on fire problem. And so, how is that problem addressed?
So how is that problem addressed?
And
Let me throw it back to
well, uh, that's how we look at the market, and we go, well,
you.
okay, um, one of the challenges in scaling a hotel company is coupling of the commercial function with the asset. So when you look at all of the traditional management companies that are out there, it's all about flags on the ground. Okay, it is all about branded operations, or the majority of it is about branded operations, and there's inherently an inhibiting factor in growing market share by the requirement to have either a new hotel come to market that you can throw your hat in the ring to brand, or a rollover of a franchise or a management contract to grow your market share. And the other alternative then, of course, is, well, we can grow market share through acquiring new product within the independent hotel space. Okay, so that's where a lot of branded operators, have shifted their traditional management contract, and in particular the franchise model, over the past 10 years, is to penetrate this space, the independent space, to grow market share. Because what we have here is a square peg and a round hole. You've got independents that by their very nature don't want to be branded, and yet you have branded chain operators, large international ones that want to penetrate this space. And so their model has shifted quite a bit over the past 10 years, with new takes on what were franchise agreements. We've got soft brand approach. We've got and so the soft brand approach is like, yes, you can stay independent, but you need to come into our distribution ecosystem so that we can distribute your product, and we can then provide you with a lower retail cost of acquisition, because you're now part of our distribution arrangement. So that's
Sure.
been a soft brand approach has been one solution. More recently now we have a loyalty based solution. Marriott Bonvoy, all Accor, where it's not just soft brand, it's more focused on just distribution over a soft brand. You don't have to be part of the collection. So the soft brand approach was all about the collection. Ascend, M Gallery, they all have their own collections, which were the traditional soft brand. But now we have another iteration of that, which is the loyalty piece, whereby you can join up with all Accor. You can still stay independent, but again, we want to take you into our distribution mix. So it's a distribution play. Let's make no bones about this.
Sure.
And probably Accor, in my opinion, lead the field in terms of their acknowledgement of the power of distribution, and their acquisition behavior over the past 10 years is very much with the view of, well, how do we gain more control over distribution? And so that's how we think about it as well. Is we go, okay, if we're going to think about hotel distribution and bringing some kind of uniformity or amalgamation or aggregation within the independent space, I mean, in our view, the first thing to do is to not need a flag in the ground, and to decouple the commercial function from the asset. So that's a key shift in thinking. Over the past, I would say, 7 or 8 years. The whole hotel companies are doing it, but equally you have more and more players like us who think about it in that context of go, okay, well, we don't need a flag, but we do need to think about the commercial space and how we aggregate our collective bargaining, as a group of independent hotels within the commercial space. How do we do that? And how do we grow at a rate that's not reliant upon new assets coming to market?
Thank you. And just unpicking some of that, obviously, technology, automation, AI, it's reshaping the commercial function. There are a plethora of tools that independent hoteliers can access and sort of demo and so on. Do we think they're being sold technology, and when really what they need is outcomes? Like, what? How do they? If you've got
Look,
a GM of a hotel like watching this, and they're bombarded seemingly with new tech options every day, where do they start?
yeah, look, it's definitely become a very competitive market. With lots of tools and lots of overlap and lots of tools that are specific to given ecosystems. What is your PMS and what does your PMS ecosystem look like? And so the integration environment in the space is super interesting, and it's highly fragmented. So if you look at Oracle, the most prevalent PMS provider globally, but yet only 7 to 8% market penetration. So it's a hugely fragmented market, and a lot of the ecosystems of new product coming to market are very much around integration to the PMS, because of course the PMS is the source of all truth. So anyone coming into the space, and I only had a discovery call this morning with a startup in the space, and they wanted to pick my brain around the PMS integration strategy for their product. What should they be focusing on? And of course, the PMS market is very much around, well, what are the big players using, and then what's the rest of the market using? Or what do the big players align with? And like it's horrific to think that we've only seen some of the last big PMSs migrate from a desktop solution to cloud-based solution, and some still in the process of executing that. So the hotel industry has been very slow to adopt new technology. Yet you've had quite, I would say, an innovative period over the past 10 years, or from 2010 to 2020, whereby you've had a lot of new guest-centric solutions come to market. When you think about the traditional PMS market, it was a back office centric solution. And now we have a lot of guest centric solutions, because you've had a lot of innovators that, stay in hotels and they go, oh my God, that was terrible. A terrible guest experience, and yes, we can use technology to solve a lot of that, but of course barriers to a lot of that solving are in the integration environment. So
And
to go on.
no, sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on.
Well, to now take it to current day, where we're in an environment where access to AI and the ability to develop solutions is becoming, very much fast tracked. How does that impact the commercial space? And so, what I see, and what we focus on in our business, is driving a lower cost of acquisition. Not just thinking about it from a retail perspective or wholesale or driving contracts, but actually in the cost of delivery or execution of the commercial function. So how can we automate the process? And of course, automation is front and center of everyone's mind at the moment. The tools that are out there and the pace of market change is just simply, it's mind blowing. It's mind blowing what new iterations of LLMs are being presented on a weekly basis. That is how fast the pace is changing, and what platform environments that they're bringing. And of course, like any new technology, we're heading into a space where, yes, there are going to be 3 or 4 big players, and those 3 or 4 big platform LLMs are already pretty well defined. And so now it becomes a question of, well, as a prospective hotelier, or as a developer of software in the hotel space, which platform do we align with? And that's kind of
Sure.
uncertain at the moment, because it's still a very early evolutionary market. Every man and his dog is producing an AI assistant, and so the ability for an off the shelf LLM with a RAG database to be able to, where your IP sits in and you can train your LLM, is very commonplace these days. So back to the question of, well, where how does this relate to the commercial function? So already I see the analyst layer in the commercial function being completely automated. You can totally produce an outcome whereby you ingest all of the data, all of the reporting from sales, marketing, revenue management. We already automate that ingestion. We automate the analysis of that data trained on our framework, and then we produce outcomes or decisions on what the strategy or the pricing is based on that data. And so, the analyst layer is already, in my view, redundant within the sector, or is on its path to being redundant. And so the next question is, well, how far up the chain does that go? How far does that penetrate the management function? And so, I see a world whereby, absolutely the management function is going to be automated to, a large degree. And those that are positioned to work across multi-domain and multi-management function outcomes are the ones that, have sustainability. At the moment, you've got a lot of, an explosion of single solution, single domain problems that are being solved by AI that are going to already be redundant in the next 18 months to 2 years,
Yeah.
because they're being subsumed by the platforms that are going to, kill their single feature, which is, child's play in their book. So it's about positioning to how can you execute across multi-domains in a complex automation level. And that's what we work on. And that's where I see the opportunity in the commercial management space, is at that level.
Thank you. And you've mentioned a number of things there around guest experience and obviously tech, and you are moderating a panel at NoVacancy London in the technology track, which is titled "Is Digital Convenience Enhancing or Diminishing the Guest Experience?" Without giving all of it away, give us a flavour of what people can expect when they listen to that panel, and you're being joined by CIO of RBH Hospitality Management and Mitz Patel of Soho House, and also Milana, Vice President of Muse. Give us a sense of what the panel is going to be talking about.
Yeah, look, we had our catch up last week, and it was really interesting because we brought this back to the same problem that's actually, most guests will relate to. When they arrive at a hotel, they've already provided their details, and yet no one knows who they are when they arrive. I mean, it shouldn't be rocket science, yet it appears to be rocket science. And so that was a key point of the discussion. Is we focused on the guest journey. So let's walk through the guest journey. Let's discuss where technology is a hindrance. And so, for example, we use the example of 10 years ago, when smartphones were really prominent, and lots of hotel companies were trying to produce this outcome of automating the whole guest arrival process. But part of the problem was when you arrived at your guest bedroom, and in order to get into the room, you had to take out your phone, you had to download a third-party app, you had to then connect the third-party app to the hotel, and you had to get a code to access the door. Now that took about 5 minutes, whereas really all you wanted to do was whip the key out of your pocket and put it on the touchpad, and you're in. And so that's a clear example of over engineering a process that is automated yet diminishes the guest experience. So it's those kind of problems that we're talking about. And because the irony with a lot of the guest journey and the guest arrival process with hotels, it's not that technology is the barrier. It's actually not technology. It's often process. So, for example, a lot of new entrants to the automated check-in market and guest access market couldn't figure out why it was so difficult to produce a solution that was seamless end to end from a guest journey perspective. But actually, they didn't really understand that rooms don't get allocated until people arrive at the front desk or just before, because they need to be cleaned first, and they need to be vacated, cleaned, and then housekeeping will alert front desk either through an automated process or through a call that the room is now available to be allocated. And so the allocation process in its own right is the barrier. It's not actually the ability for technology to execute the process. So it's the ones that have achieved this successfully use technology in a really good manner, but they also enable it by acknowledging how process in the back office function needs to change to and adapt to align with these new solutions in market.
Thank you. We look forward to that panel. And I know, Jude, Nuvho have been involved with NoVacancy for many years in Australia. Tell us why you were excited to be involved in the London edition.
Yeah, absolutely. We were involved since day one in the Australian market. So we've exhibited, at NoVacancy since I think our first one was 2018. For us, it's an absolute no-brainer moving into new market. There's always a great buzz around the floor. It's a great forum to understand who is new in the zoo, who the incumbents are. A great place to get access to new technology that's in market. So from a hotelier perspective, access to new technology, what new products are in market, but equally from a supplier perspective, for us, it's a really great place to connect with other suppliers that are in market, to collaborate with, to realign with, to have discussions with. So it works on both ends from my perspective. Educational, the conferences and forums and summits that are put on are numerous. So it's a great educational summit. The production around summits at NoVacancy, it's not a single summit. It's multiple themed summits running concurrently, 5 or 6 different summits running throughout the day. So this is like 5 or 6 individual conferences running throughout the day, as well as the exhibition. Of course, that's the draw card for punters to come in to attract footfall for exhibitors, and it's a really well tried and tested model.
Jude, thank you very much for your time today. Obviously, people can come and see Nuvho on the show floor, as well as listen to Jude moderating the panel around guest experience and all things digital on day one in the afternoon in the technology track. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. And look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.